All right, let me paint you a picture. It's Monday night between, 1995 and the early 2000s, 2001, right? Let's go into it. You finished your homework, or at least you told yourself you'd do it later. And let's be honest, a lot of us probably got home and didn't even look twice. We didn't do our homework. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Now it's later on in the evening, the TV is on, and it's almost 9 p.m. Eastern time. Raw is War is about to come on, all right? And something happens. Doesn't matter what. A segment ends, the lights drop, the arena just starts going absolutely insane, and the crowd is already losing it before anything even happens, right? They're doing all the preview tapes that you're watching as it leads up to the show. And if you grew up in the 90s like I did, you were watching Silk Stockings before Monday Night Raw even came on, all right? Before a single person even decided to sit down and think about wrestling, that show was on. And we'll probably get into an episode and talk about that show sooner than later. Also, if you were a WCW fan, WCW decided to counter WWE by starting an hour earlier. They would start at 7:57 Eastern time. Man, those were the good old days. Those are the good days, all right? If Monday nights as a kid meant something to you in that specific range, right? That specific year range, you already know exactly what this episode is going to be about, because growing up, we loved football too. And we loved the little Monday night jingle that they had. Are you ready for some football? But I think that came later on. We really got into the NFL the older we got. But before we got older, right, we watched Monday Night Raw or WCW Monday Nitro, right? And if wrestling, as I mentioned before, wasn't your thing, then you were somewhere else, right? I need you to hear me on something before we go any further, because for a lot of us, this wasn't just wrestling. This was the most must-watch 2 hours of television in America when Raw started earlier at 8 p.m. from 8 to 10, all right? Not the most watched sports show, not the most must watch cable program, the most must watch. Can't even say that. 2 hours, period. And the thing the whole school talked about every single morning, if you got breakfast at school or even at lunchtime in any of your 3 lunch periods, you were sitting with your friends and talking about what had happened the night before on at Monday Night Raw. Interesting that we all kind of lived almost the same life. Today I want to go back inside of all of it, man. I want to talk about what Monday nights were like for us. Whether you watch football or not, sometimes you were just channel surfing and going through different channels and you got stuck and you watched it. You got into the storytelling, into what was happening on your screen. We're going to revisit that. We're going to go all into it right now. Welcome to In Case I Missed It. And can you smell what we're cooking? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to In Case I Missed It. I'm your host, Alex, if you didn't know. And we're back. Quick thing. Last week, we did the 1991 year recap. We talked about the Nevermind album. We talked about Michael Jordan. We talked about Terminator 2, the Bulls' first championship, Magic Johnson's announcement, a lot of things. And if you're into the politics, the whole Soviet Union dissolving on Christmas Day. I mean, it's not like you were into politics back then. Your parents were. But maybe now as a historian, you're looking back and going, holy crap, I lived through that. One of the most loaded years, I believe, on the entire decade. And we gave it everything, 1991. Go back if you missed it, because 1991 does deserve your time. But today, as I mentioned before, today's a different type of energy, because today we're going to be talking about pro wrestling. I know. Interesting enough, there's space in here for that, because pro wrestling was part of the entire pop pop culture era of America, the 90s. We'll talk about WWF Attitude Era. We'll talk about WCW Monday Nitro coming into the fold in 1995 and giving them some true competition and what was happening back then. The eyes of the world were watching either Monday Nitro, if you were a wrestling fan, Monday Night Raw for WWF if you were a WWF fan, or just channel surfing going back and forth. There's a lot there. For me personally, it means a lot. It means a lot. This era meant a lot to me, and I'll tell you why. It was appointment television for me and my dad. It was the one time that I was able to sit down with my dad and watch television together. He worked all day, so he finally got home. We made dinner, we ate, we sat down. Boom, 8 o'clock came around, and we were going between TNT and USA Network every single Monday night. And we would like just go crazy over what was happening on the television. We would talk about it. He would tell me exactly what he felt, who he hated. It was a very, very good bonding moment between Dad and I. And I hope that you guys out there had similar interactions with your family members, brothers, sisters, uncles, whatever, watching some pro wrestling. We'll talk about Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, D-Generation X. Over on WCW, you had Sting, Lex Luger, Booker T. You had a lot of names, and in that era, there was a lot of names flip-flopping, going back and forth between companies. It was great. It was good. So if you're a wrestling fan, this one's for you. The Monday Night Wars, as we know, right? The most intense television ratings battle in the history of cable television. And we'll talk about how WWF came back from basically losing 84 straight weeks, 83 straight weeks to completely dominate and eventually end up the only competition for up to 18 years before AEW came around in 2018. So let's just get right into it, friends. First things first, before you can understand what the Attitude Era pretty much was, you have to understand how badly WWF was losing back in the day, because WCW, as I mentioned before, well, they launched Monday Nitro in September of 1995, went directly head-to-head with Raw. Monday night, same time, you just had to pick a channel, and for 83, 84 consecutive weeks, from June 1996 to about April of 1998, WCW beat WWF in the ratings every single Monday night. They were even blowing Monday Night Football out of the water. All right, that's 83, 84 consecutive freaking weeks. That's a year and a half of losing every week, no breaks, going to work on Tuesdays knowing you lost again. Well, you know, after Monday night, you would have your meetings, I'm assuming, and seeing what the ratings were. And the reason WCW was winning, well, first of all, I do believe it was because they had nostalgia. I mean, you look at people who jumped over to kind of raise the ratings for WCW back in the day. You had Hogan, Savage, Ric Flair, the names everyone already knew and loved, right? And it felt comfortable. It felt like something you knew. And then in July of 1996, Hulk Hogan turned heel at Bash at the Beach, joined Hall and Nash, who came over from WWE, formerly known as Razor Ramon, and Big Daddy Cool Diesel. They formed the MWO, Black and White. They spray painted absolutely everything. Cool in a way only wrestling hadn't been in a long time, because wrestling was so segmented. They had plumbers and repo men and clowns and dentists, positioned people, convicts. They had Mounties. It was a weird time, right? If you had some type of profession, you said F this, and you became a professional wrestler, right? Like IRS and, oh my gosh, I'm just going back here. The WWF looked at all of that, right? What they were doing over at WCW, and had to make a decision. They had to start doing something completely different, because I mean, if you read the stories and heard it a million times, they were going to go out of business, But what happened next for them changed absolutely everything. All right. There was a specific moment back then that I remember clearly as a kid, and I'm hoping that y'all remember this. My dad and I used to get the pay-per-views as well. If you guys remember, 60, what was it? We're like $60 a pay-per-view back in the day. Unless you had that special little cable box, that black little cable box that would scramble up channels and then descramble them. And then all of a sudden, you had every channel for free and you were watching everything from pay-per-views to movies, special channels. But I do remember this specific one. Because we all went to school that Monday and completely like tried to break everything down. All right. This is for you nerds out there like myself. November 9th, 1997, the Montreal Screwjob. Woo-wee. If you know what that means, you probably felt something right now. Right? And for those of you who are not wrestling fans who are just kind of just supporting the show, here's the short version. Bret the Hitman Hart. You don't even need to know. Just know that Bret the Hitman Hart was a WWF champion. He was already set to leave to the competition to WCW. His contract was up. He was supposed to lose the title to Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series in Montreal, his hometown. Bret Hart refused to lose that damn title in Canada. He had creative control in his contract, so he exercised that control. Okay? Now, Vince McMahon, at the time, the actual owner at that period, told the referee to ring the bell anyway, while Shawn Michaels had him in his own finishing move, right? So he had Bret Hart down, and Bret Hart never, by the way, all right, tapped. He had him in a submission move, all right? And while the match was still going, while Bret Hart hadn't tapped yet, Bret Hart lost that title in his hometown on live freaking television. He was a hero out there, a freaking hero. Yes, anyone who's listening right now, pro wrestling was that big back then. All right, it was that important. It was that shit. All right. Now, he lost the title without agreeing to it. Now, here's where the Montreal Screwjob was created. McMahon, better known as Mr. McMahon, and not Vince, the announcer, because he was also an announcer, not Vince, the businessman. I'm talking about McMahon, all right, himself, the evil corporate chairman, the man who controlled everything and would do anything to keep it. The character wasn't written in a writer's room, all right, that Mr. McMahon character, if you guys are following. Real life handed it to him, and he leaned completely into it, because what the WWF needed, what the product desperately needed, was a villain that felt real. At that point, WWF just felt so gimmicky, so gimmicky. This is why WCW was whooping their ass, was because WCW leaned more towards the realistic style of storytelling, right? But now they suddenly had one. WWF did, with McMahon and what he did. All right. That was the beginning of pretty much the WWF takeover. Because everyone was watching it. Everyone was talking about that specific moment. It was picked up by newspapers. It was everywhere. Magazines were talking about it. Was this real? Was this fake? McMahon got punched in the face by Bret Hart backstage, had a black eye, spit in his face, like on live television. You see like the wad of spit just flying as he was on the ring, looking down at McMahon, and just a big wad, you see it flying through the air, hit McMahon right in the freaking eyeball. Came down, destroyed the ring announcer's table. I mean, got back into the ring, pointed at the camera, and with his fingers spelled out WCW. Like, hey, this is where I'm going. This is where you're going to follow me. Crazy times in pro wrestling. No one knew what was happening. Was this real? Was this fake? Everyone was just clutching their pearls at the time. All right. And now you have this bigger than life villain in McMahon, right? Because he kind of leaned into that. Now he leaned into the fact that he was the villain. He was the person that basically screwed Bret Hart out of the title. He's a dickhead. And at that moment, as you guys know, like in movies, you got an antagonist, a protagonist, right? You needed someone. You needed someone to fight the villain. And they needed a hero at that point to see who could step up. And they had one. Now, if you're a pro wrestling fan, you're following me here, right? You're following me. You know who that was. And that was the one and only Stone Cold Steve Austin. I don't even know that you need to be a wrestling fan to know who Stone Cold Steve Austin was. Okay? Let me tell you something about Stone Cold for anyone who hasn't watched, who wasn't watching closely, or maybe needs a little more information. Steve Austin, he was released from the competition from WCW in 1995. Now, he was released via voicemail, okay? Kind of like what they do now in companies where they sit you down and they fire you via Zoom, right? Eric Bischoff, who was running WCW at the time, left him a message firing him via voicemail, as I said before. He jumped ship. He came to WWF with an idea. A guy from Texas who didn't take orders, drank beer in the ring, was rude to everyone, and absolutely did not care what you thought about it. Now, that was not initially how it started. He came out a little bit more tame than that, but we worked ourselves there. And it's easy to find online. I don't need to sit here and tell you the whole story. June of 1996, King of the Ring Austin wins the King of the Ring tournament, grabs the damn microphone, right? And again, if you were a fan, you know where I'm going with this. And says, Austin 316 says, I just whooped your ass. That line, that specific moment, that's when the takeover, I believe, started. And it built from there. It completely started the back and forth with the channel surfing, right? Going back and forth between WCW and WWF, all right? He had the catchphrases, the beer, his Stone Cold Stunner, middle fingers. He had a truck, the constant battles with authority, and everyone kind of resonated with that because everyone hated their boss. Everyone had like some type of beef with their boss. And Stone Cold Steve Austin pretty much kind of led that life as well. You know, like he had his boss that he hated, right? So he became the one against authority, right? The constant battles. I think it felt like forever, years between them. Austin became the working class hero, fighting the corrupt bosses. That story, that one story, that's it. As simple as that. The boss versus the employee, as I said before, the system versus the individual, the man in the suit versus the man with the beer in his hand. That, as I said before, connected everybody, not just wrestling fans. I'm talking about my dad, who was a blue-collared worker. He was a truck driver. He delivered. He did his thing. All right. He was a wrestling fan, maybe not as big as he thought he was when he was little, but he still watched it with me. But that storyline right there of whooping his boss's ass, I was right there with him because everybody had a boss they wanted to flip off or to punch directly in the mouth. And Stone Cold was doing it on national television every single Monday night. But he wasn't the only one. We also had The Rock. You guys all know who The Rock is. Maui from Moana. The Rock didn't start as The Rock either. He started as some jobber named Rocky Maivia, smiling. He was wholesome. He was a third-generation wrestler, and the crowd immediately started booing him for it. Not because he was bad, because he was just, I think, a little too nice, too clean, too corporate, just a little too perfect. The crowd wanted something with edges. The 90s were that type of time. The 90s were edgy. We wanted that. We wanted that to be on our televisions, right? So he found edges and became The Rock, the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. With catchphrases such as "Know your role and shut your mouth," if you smell what The Rock is cooking. We all went to school. We all were repeating the same thing. We were all using the catchphrases. They weren't just catchphrases, though. This was a stand-up comedy act wrapped inside a wrestling character, which freaking worked, man. And Dwayne Johnson, the person, could talk, right? The Rock could talk in a way that made everyone in the building feel like they were in on everything that he was saying. He had the entire crowd eating at the palm of his hands. Everyone in the audience was repeating his catchphrases. He'd also mocked the crowd, by the way. The crowd loved it. He'd mocked himself. The crowd loved it even more. All right. You still had the Austin versus McMahon. Then you had The Rock versus Austin. Everyone versus everyone. This was pro wrestling at its highest. WCW was kind of trying to do the same thing. They had the NWO at the time. They were growing a faction made of so many different wrestlers. Everyone thought that everyone in the NWO was from WWE or WWF at the time, and they were infiltrating WCW. And we were sitting there. We didn't know what was real. We didn't know what was fake. We just fucking enjoyed it because that's who we were. We were kids. It was the 90s. It was fun. It was interesting. We were all into it. The combinations, by the way, kept rotating on both ends. All right. And every single one of them worked. Everything was going great. But for some reason, WCW hit a stall moment and WWF kept on rising at the time. All right. And let's go back now into that war because the Attitude Era and the Monday Night Wars are pretty much all the same story. You can't separate them. On April 13th, 1998, for the first time since June of 96, WWF Raw beat WCW Nitro in the ratings. I was a huge WCW fan. I know WWF was doing some cool, fun stuff, and I didn't mind watching it and talking about it. All right, but I was a bigger WCW fan. I sat there every single Saturday night at 6:05 p.m. on TBS with my dad watching Saturday Night's Main Event with my dad for WCW. Which obviously, you know, they told stories that led also into Monday Nitro. I watched the pay-per-views on Sundays with Dad. I watched the specials that WCW had as well during the week. It was great. It was great appointment television, especially for me growing up. I was an introvert. I did a lot of things, but I loved watching and sitting down and enjoying pro wrestling. And I think I enjoyed it more because I had that time with my dad. Right? It was great. But let's go back into this because 83, 84 weeks were done. And the thing that turned it, again, was that Austin versus McMahon, the working class hero versus the corporate villain. That storyline that had real emotion inside a stage product. It was the thing that finally moved that needle that they needed to jump the hump and move upward, and what kind of kept WCW at bay. But WCW didn't lose the war gradually, right? I think they lost it in one night. And let's talk about that. You might not agree with me, but hear me out. January 4th, 1999, WCW had a huge main event. Hogan versus Nash for the title. Big show, big match, man. And someone at WCW made a decision that still baffles a lot of us, including myself, to this day. Now, WCW, now AEW announcer Tony Schiavone on live television gave away the result of that night's taped WWF Raw match. So he went on television as soon as the show started, and WCW did this on purpose. WCW would start at 7:57 p.m. Eastern time so that they can give away what Raw was doing. Because Raw used to be taped one week, live the next. Taped. That's how they saved money. Taped one week, live the next. So they would that specific Monday, right? That specific Monday, WWF was taped. WCW knew what the outcome was of those tapings and decided to start the broadcast early at 7:57 p.m. Eastern Time on TNT and give away the results of that night's taped Raw match. He told everyone watching Nitro that Mankind, Mick Foley, was going to win the WWF title. And he added, "That'll sure put some butts in the seats." Now, he said that sarcastically. Okay? Like it was a joke. 600,000 people switched channels to Monday Night Raw specifically to watch Mankind win that title. 600,000 because WCW mocked the result and people wanted to go see it anyway. And then in the WCW main event, Kevin Nash came out, laid down in the middle of the ring for Hulk Hogan after Hogan gave him a poke to the chest, which is better known as the poke of doom now. No drama, no match. He just basically lied down. One of the most deflating moments for me as a WCW fan. I was like, what the fudge are they doing? I looked over at my dad. I'm like, what? What just happened? What just happened? And after that night, WWF Raw never lost the ratings war again. I spoke to my cousin about it. Spoke to friends in school about it. I was in an AOL online chat room talking about it. WCW collapsed slowly, then all at once. It was rough. I would still tune in to watch because I loved WCW so much. But I also was watching what WWF was doing at the time. I would be on USA longer than I was on TNT going back and forth. The WWF essentially bought WCW in March of 2001. I was in Marine Corps boot camp. I remember my brother sending me a letter because that's what we did. We wrote letters. I opened it up, read it, and I remember him writing. He was very young at the time. He wrote to me in his chicken scratch and said, "Hey, the Giants are going to the Super Bowl against the Baltimore Ravens. I know you hate the Giants." I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan. And then he says, "By the way, it looks like WCW is gone." He kept me up to date with everything. He also told me everything that happened at the pay-per-views. I love that. Love my brother for that. Okay. The WWF bought WCW in March of 2001 for $3 million. The company had been beating them for a year and a half, right? The company that had been beating them for a year and a half sold for a measly $3 million. For context, WWF, WWE now, AEW, they're in the billions. They're worth billions now. The Attitude Era at that time won, and the Attitude Era was crazy. I mean, how many of you were running to school telling your friends to suck it? Telling your teachers when they pissed you off to suck it, flipping people off, giving people the freaking people's elbow in the middle of gym class, stunning people, super kicking people in the mouth. It was crazy. And I think that wrestling also shaped the 90s and how we acted. Because at that time, everyone in entertainment was mingling with pro wrestlers. There was movie stars, there was basketball players, there was everything, action stars. Everyone was involved with pro wrestling in a way. You had Dennis Rodman, I don't know if you guys remember, becoming part of the NWO. You had Karl Malone joining WCW. You had Mike Tyson Mike Tyson joined WWF for a while as well. If you remember, he was like a special guest referee. The stars were definitely out. You could watch WWF back then, and you didn't know it, but everyone was pretty much a Hall of Famer. You had stars of all kind that were embedded. Pro wrestling is so embedded in 90s and 90s pop culture. It's phenomenal to even think how big pro wrestling was back then. Let's get into our Did You Know segment here. 3 facts, short, sharp. They're going to hit you and hopefully jolt some memories as well. The Austin versus McMahon storyline, the most successful angle of the entire Attitude Era, was created by accident, as I said before. The Montreal Screwjob wasn't scripted. It was a real thing that really happened. McMahon, instead of running from it, well, he looked at the heat that he was getting from all over the world and decided to become the character that the story freaking needed. Real life handed the WWF its greatest villain completely by accident. And they ran with it for years. Stone Cold also flip-flopped. Stone Cold was a villain. He was a hero. But most of us cheered him anyway, no matter what the hell he was doing. Number 2, at its peak in 1998 and 1999, both Raw and Nitro were consistently pulling over 10 million viewers each every Monday. 2 wrestling shows, 10 million viewers apiece. Combined, 20 million people choosing between 2 wrestling shows on a Monday night. You don't hear about that today. WWF is Monday Night Raw, SmackDown. They're barely getting 1 million viewers now. It's crazy. It's crazy. 20 million. 2 to 3 million combined now, I'd say, per month. But that's where we're at. This is what the Monday Night Wars did for professional wrestling and pop culture and the 90s itself. Okay, the Attitude Era is the 90s. It really is. When you look at it, that's you cannot deny it. You cannot deny it. Number 3, The Rock was almost released in 1997. Yes, the guy everyone loves. Rocky Maivia, the smiling babyface. The crowd wouldn't accept him. They hated him. Internal conversations happened about whether he had a future with this company. Was he it? Could he actually be it? Man, he got injured. He had time to think. He came back as The Rock, the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, one of the most recognized human beings on this damn earth. I think he was like one of Time's most influential people. He's become a A-list actor, billions of dollars, has his own companies. The man transcended professional wrestling and went into like deep and further. He's a TKO board member now, which means he helps run WWF. That's crazy. That's just crazy. One of the highest paid actors in Hollywood now. Was almost gone before the Attitude Era even started. He comes from a lineage. His dad, Rocky Johnson. Like, there's a lot there. There's a lot. His entire family is now in wrestling. That was 1997. They almost got rid of him. We almost didn't have Maui. Think about that next time you see his name on a movie poster or you're watching Moana or whatnot or anything that he's been in, right? Pretty much. Let's get into our top 5 list here. Top 5 WWF Attitude Era moments. As much as I love WCW, and it had a ton of great moments, I do got to say that the Attitude Era pretty much destroyed them in anything and everything. All right, let's go to the top 5. And real talk, this is hard. This is hard because WCW was also hot at the time. They were doing pay-per-views in Sturgis. I don't know if you guys remember that. They were doing spring break episodes where they had a freaking ring in the middle of the pool. They had Halloween Havoc was one of my favorite pay-per-view shows that they put out all year. Fall Brawl was great. I mean, they had themselves a hell of a run. Okay? They really did. So this was hard. Not because I couldn't think of moments, by the way. Like I said before, both companies are full of them, but because I had to cut like 132 of them. Okay? We'll stick to the Attitude Era here. The Attitude Era was nothing but moments every single week. Right? But these 5 here that I chose, these 5 made you run into school on a Tuesday morning and just make sure everyone knew what the hell was happening. So let's get right to it. Top 5 Attitude Era moments that made the whole school talk the next day. Number 5, the DX invasion of WCW. On April 27th, 1998, D-Generation X drove to a WCW event in an actual military Jeep that they rented with a cannon. They set up outside the arena where WCW was going to go live from and cut promos on WCW through a megaphone while WCW's show was happening inside. They tried to get in. Security stopped them. So they just stayed outside being as loud as humanly possible. They went into the CNN building. They were talking to people. They were telling people to say, suck it. WCW cameras wouldn't go near them. WWF cameras caught everything, aired it on Raw the following Monday. This wasn't a storyline. This was 2 actual competing television programs at war with each other. And one side showed up at the other's building with a damn megaphone and a tank. That was number 5. Number 4, Stone Cold. Stone Cold stuns the hell out of Vince McMahon. Okay. Any of them, by the way. Or any like 3,000 of them that he committed against Vince. Take your pick, because every single time Austin hit the stunner on McMahon, every single Monday night that freaking glass shattered on the entrance on the Titantron and that music hit. I mean, look at old videos of professional wrestling, either from WCW or WWE, and the crowds. It was insane. There was flash photography, it was going off everywhere every single Monday night. That resulted right in just moments being made for everyone. The crowd reaction was the same. Absolute pure delirium. They weren't even cheering. It was just delirium. They were going nuts. It was the kind of reaction you still hear in your memory right now, 25 years later. I remember sitting at a WWF show. I remember taking my brother with me. Stone Cold comes out in a four-wheeler. Glass shatters. Just the whole place goes crazy, man. Crazy. And I could still hear that in my head. Okay, almost 27 years later, because everyone watching, 8 years old to 18 years old, 45 years old, understood exactly what they were seeing. The employee beating the boss's ass, the individual defeating the damn system. That's what we were watching every single Monday night. That was number 4. Number 3, The Rock. The Rock's promos. Any Monday night, pick one. I know that sounds vague, but it's intentionally vague, because there was no single greatest Rock promo. There were hundreds of great freaking Rock promos, and every single one of them made the whole crowd, and the crew probably working, feel like they were at the best party they've ever been to. Pick any Monday night between 1998 and 2001. If The Rock had the microphone, you were laughing, you were chanting along, you were doing the eyebrow in your freaking house, even though, the people's eyebrow was just phenomenal. He's the only one that could probably get it as high as he did. The Rock was born knowing how to do everything he was doing in that ring. And I don't think anyone has came close to it in a while, except for maybe MJF in AEW. He can really work the mic. If you guys are not watching AEW, Wednesday nights, 8 p.m., you guys definitely have to go check it out. TBS. Number 3. That was number 3. Number 2, Mankind wins the WWF Championship January 4th, 1999. We talked about this the night WCW gave away the results and 600,000 people switched channels anyway. The moment itself, Jim Ross on commentary, completely losing it, completely losing his composure. You guys remember that? As God as my witness, Mankind has won the WWF Championship. It still rings in my ear, that call, baby. That is the sound of someone who genuinely cares about what he was watching and cannot contain it. Still get like chills talking about it. The image of Foley, his torn ear, missing teeth, holding that championship was one of the most genuinely heartwarming things that at that time WWF produced in that entire era. Mick Foley was the guy who wasn't supposed to be champion. And there he was, holding the belt. That was number 2. And number 1, you guys remember this? I didn't want to go too long on it, but Mankind, once again, Mick Foley, Hell in a Cell, June 28th, 1998. I don't need to say much here because if you know, you already know. And if you don't know, well, there is a moment in professional wrestling in the entire history of the sport that stands alone. The Undertaker throws Mankind off the top of a 16-foot steel cage. A human being flung off onto a concrete floor with a tiny bit of padding. Luckily, there was a table there to break his fall. The crowd went silent. Not loud, completely silent. The silence that happens when something occurs, something occurs that nobody knew was possible and everyone's brain needed a second to kind of catch up to see what the hell they just saw. Then the roar. And then Jim Ross, because Jim Ross is the soundtrack of our entire era. Him and Tony Schiavone. I love you, Tony. Tony Schiavone was the voice of my childhood as well. You remember what Jim said. As God is my witness, that man is broken in half. That was number 1. No debate, my friends, no discussion, just that moment and that one singular call. That's your top 5 list. If you want, tell me what I left off. Tell me your number 1. Tell me your top 5 in the comments. I want to see them. I know you guys have a lot to say. And I already know someone's going to say something crazy about my calls here or about my list. But whatever. It's pro wrestling, friends. Like, it's not that serious. Okay. This was episode 9. And here's the thing I want to leave with you about that whole pro wrestling in the 90s era. What made, 20 million people tune into wrestling every Monday? It wasn't the athleticism. It really wasn't. The feats of what they were doing in the ring was incredible, obviously. But that's not what pulled 20 million people. What pulled 20 million people was the fact that there was, stories mixed in with the fighting, right? And I got to say this real quick. It's why I love WCW. WCW had storytelling, but they also had the fighting aspect, the wrestling, the athleticism in the ring. They had the cruiserweights. They had the Japanese wrestlers, the Mexican wrestlers, American wrestlers. They had European wrestlers. It was great. That's what pulled me into WCW, was that. They started sprinkling stories within everything as well. And obviously, that's part of wrestling, right? The storytelling. But you got to have that. You got to have the fighting in it. So WWF ran off because, they decided to get edgier than WCW could. Characters changed in WWF. You started caring about them. They weren't just dentists or freaking doctors or kings or clowns or repo men, right? Stakes felt real. You had villains who were genuinely hateable between the NWO and McMahon and whomever. Triple H was being a heel in WWF. You had heroes who were genuinely relatable. You had Sting. You had Diamond Dallas Page. You had so many. Sid Vicious. You had a whole list in WCW. Rey Mysterio. In WWF, you had The Rock, when he turned good, and you had Stone Cold, and you had Triple H when he was good. Like there was a whole list of wrestlers, Mankind, that made you care about what was happening, right? Someone like Stone Cold didn't win because he was the strongest. He won because he refused to stop. Because every time someone tried to crush him, and they tried constantly, creatively, Austin found a way to beat that, right? The Rock didn't become The Rock because someone handed him a better script. He became The Rock because he found the character that was already inside him and committed to it completely. Same thing happened with Sting. Sting went from Surfer Sting to the black and white, the Crow Sting. That was something that was within him that Razor Ramon, who Scott Hall at the time helped nourish and bring to life. Those characters felt more real. They just, Nash, like everyone in WCW started turning that tide to become more realistic versions of the characters that they were trying to portray on the screen. Those were real things, all inside of a stage product. Real commitment, real charisma, real energy. And us in a generation that was built on appointment television, because we didn't have DVRs. And if, you could record it on a VCR, that's fine. But, the timing and the things and the that and having the ability to sit in front of someone else and talk about it. It was great. A generation of kids absorbed something from it without knowing what they were absorbing from it. I was one of them because we thought that they were just watching, or we were just watching freaking pro wrestling from WCW and WWF on a normal ass Monday night, right? We were always learning even then, even from that moment. Okay. Guys, 5-star review on Apple Podcasts if this episode made you feel young again, brought those memories back. If you did the eyebrow at one point during this whole show, go leave it right now. It takes 30 seconds. And share this one with whoever watched Raw or Nitro with you, your wrestling friends, your siblings, whoever called you after every Monday night to debrief just what happened, who you sat with at the lunch table. Send it. No explanation needed. They'll know immediately why. Next week, though, we're going somewhere that every person who was home at 3 p.m. on a weekday in the 90s has a very strong memory of. Or if you stayed homesick. Next week is the golden era of 90s daytime talk shows. Jerry Springer, Maury Povich, I think I said that wrong, Ricky Lake, Sally Jesse Raphael, Montel Williams, Oprah, and the absolute peak of all these shows. We all remember Jerry Springer. Okay, the DNA test, the paternity reveals, chairs being thrown, the topics nobody else was touching on television. All at 10 o'clock in the morning. And the moment it all got too wild. And basically what happened after. Come back next week. We'll be here talking about it. I'm Alex. And as always, in case I missed it, the 90s were better. See you next week.